Picture a sepia-toned movie house in 1955. Reels clicking, perfume and popcorn mingling in the dark. Now, fast forward to today. Some of those hand-holding couples are still laughing, still kissing goodnight, their wedding rings warm from 7 decades of wear. Ready to meet 10 love legends with hearts that never aged? Alan and Arlene Alda, the rum cake lightning strike. It began at a cramped college dinner in 1956. 2 borrowed card tables pushed together, steam from overcooked pasta fogging the windows. Across clinking cutlery, Alan Alda heard Arlene's bright laugh ricochet off the glass before he even knew her name. When a wobbling rum cake slid off the centerpiece plate and splattered across the linoleum, every guest froze. Everyone except Alan and Arlene. They both dropped to their knees, scooped up the glaze-soaked crumbs, and kept eating while giggling like delinquent kids in church. That improvised dessert became their forever shorthand for facing chaos together. They married the next March, and decades later their idea of date night is still chess, ladder ball in the yard, and a film before bed. Parkinson's, tremors, and all. As Alan tweeted on their anniversary, "We ate cake off the floor, and she had me at ha." 68 years in, the punchline is still paying dividends. They swear the secret is asking new questions every day, then listening until the last crumb of a story is gone. Try it, the Aldas insist. It never gets stale, ever. William and Bonnie Bartlett Daniels, the stagecraft soulmates. Their first rehearsal at Northwestern University felt more trench warfare than romance. Cues were missed, tempers hot, but Bill Daniels noticed Bonnie Bartlett's calm eyes tracking every beat. He asked to walk her home. She challenged him to learn his lines instead. Stubbornness turned to sparks on a windy June evening in 1951. When they eloped between summer stock bookings. Money was so scarce that their rings were the backstage prop bands from a student production of Romeo and Juliet. The marriage survived a stillbirth, overlapping Broadway schedules, and the Hollywood gossip mill. In the experimental 1960s, they even tried an open phase, only to discover that jealousy tasted like cheap road coffee. So they recommitted, this time for good. 74 years later, they trade quips from twin recliners and still critique each other's line readings. Asked for his secret, Daniels told Forbes, "I'm an actor. I'm making it up as I go along." Bonnie rolled her eyes but kept smiling. Mutual respect, they say, is the longest-running show in town. And after 7 decades, the curtain has yet to fall. Not tonight, not tomorrow. Martin and Janet Sheen, the Apocalypse Now anchors. When young Ramon Estevez saw Janet Templeton backstage at a New York audition in 1961, her shy smile disarmed him harder than any director's note. They married that Christmas, celebrating with cafeteria pie and subway serenades. 15 years later, on a humid Philippine set, Martin Sheen suffered a heart attack amid the chaos of filming Apocalypse Now. Production halted, but Janet flew in, slept on a bamboo mat beside his hospital cot, and coaxed him back with whispered jokes and Hail Marys. He calls that vigil the hinge of his life. "Janet slept on the floor and saved my soul," he told Rolling Stone. Ever since, whenever darkness threatens, they drop to the living room floor, clasp hands, and breathe together until the worry passes. Their Los Angeles home still hosts nightly gatherings of 4 adult children and a growing brood of grandkids. Janet, once an art student, paints birthday portraits. Martin grills garlic-rubbed corn. At 64 years wed, they insist the job description remains simple. Hold the other person steady while the river rages. Everything else, they joke, is extra rehearsal time. Dan and Jean Rather, the newsroom North Star. He was a hurricane-hungry cub reporter in Houston. She was a prim secretary who preferred oil paints to deadlines. Their 1957 blind date ended with Dan stammering an invitation to drive her home, except he'd forgotten where he'd parked. Jean laughed, found the car herself, and told him to hurry before another story broke. They married that spring, starting a partnership that crossed 11 wars, 2 moon landings, and every network shakeup imaginable. While Dan chased headlines, Jean raised 2 children and nurtured her own art career, slipping watercolor notes into his luggage. "Stay curious, come home safe." He kept every one in a red shoebox labeled "Reality Check." Asked what still dazzled him after 67 years, Dan replied, "She's so supportive, so kind, and besides that, she's smoking hot." Jean blushed at the appraisal, then reminded him to adjust his tie before the camera rolled. When she passed in late 2024, Dan opened their final broadcast scrapbooks and whispered, "Courage. Off-air grief. On-air grit." Her compass remains fixed over his newsroom desk, pointing always to heart due north, guiding him through deadlines. Bob and Ginnie Newhart, the deadpan double act. Comedian Buddy Hackett once pointed across a Hollywood party and predicted, "That girl will marry you and name a kid after me." Bob Newhart, shy and bespectacled, chuckled until Virginia Ginny Quinn strolled over in 1962 and delivered the cleanest punchline of his life. "Hi, I'm Free Friday." They wed in January 1963, financing the honeymoon with club dates where Bob's telephone routine monologues killed and Ginny timed the light cues. Laughter, they learned, is portable currency. It buys patience when sitcom pilots fail and empathy when punchlines bomb. Together, they raised 4 children in Bel Air, negotiating fame with rotating carpool duty. For their 50th anniversary, the kids surprised them with a reel of Bob's most disastrous stand-up flugs. Ginny's cackle nearly broke the audiometer. Before her passing in 2023, she told CBS Sunday Morning, "There's something about laughter and the longevity of a marriage." Bob replied that heaven must have solid acoustics because he could still hear her laugh. 60-plus years on, every new joke begins with her echo in his ear. He keeps writing setups just to hear it. Time to stretch, sip water, maybe smile at whoever's sitting beside you. Statistically, marriages that crest the 60-year mark make up less than 3% of all unions worldwide. Yet every year, more than 14,000 diamond anniversaries are recorded in the US alone. Sociologists credit shared humor, flexible roles, and, no surprise, good healthcare. Historians note another tool: handwritten letters. Every couple you've heard so far preserved boxes of inked pages. Postage stamps faded to sepia. So if you still crave a future golden anniversary, start writing tonight. Future historians will thank you, and so will your older self. Jimmy and Rosalynn Carter, the rumble seat romance. Plains, Georgia, smelled of clay dust and magnolia when Naval Cadet Jimmy Carter borrowed his father's Ford pickup in 1945. He invited Rosalynn Smith to a movie. Her sister chaperoned in front, while the 2 lovebirds perched in the rumble seat. Stars overhead, country road humming below. Jimmy kissed her before the closing credits and told his mother the next morning, "Rosalynn is the girl I'm going to marry." They did just that in July 1946, beginning the longest presidential marriage in American history. Through peanut prices, submarines, the White House, and decades of humanitarian work, they held hands, literally. Secret Service agents joked that their protective formation had to bend around the joined palms. Even Alzheimer's and hospice couldn't pry them apart. On her final night in 2023, Jimmy pressed his forehead to hers and whispered the traveling blessing they gave Habitat volunteers. Love is still the greatest power. 77 years of proof now echo from every house they helped build. Rosalynn once logged each shared sunrise in a pocket diary, amassing 26 notebooks that Jimmy now rereads for courage during dawn prayers. Kirk and Anne Douglas, the Spartacus Sweethearts, Paris, 1953. Actor Kirk Douglas hired multilinguist publicist Anne Bidens to help sell Act of Love. He proposed dinner. She counteroffered a brisk, "No, thank you." The rejection intrigued him more than any standing ovation. A year later, they married in Las Vegas, Anne still wary of Hollywood's fickle spotlight. She made one rule: no matter the quarrel, it ends with a kiss. Kirk, the gladiator of Spartacus, obeyed like a schoolboy. Together, they launched the Douglas Foundation, rebuilding LA playgrounds and donating more than $118 million to hospitals and film industry retirees. After Kirk's helicopter crash in 1991 and a debilitating stroke in 1996, Anne became his tireless translator, joking, "I speak fluent Kirk." Asked on their 60th anniversary how they settled disagreements, he grinned, "We solve them with a kiss." When Kirk died at 103, Anne, then 101, blew one more kiss toward the coffin and murmured, "See you soon, darling." 66 years of film-worthy devotion rolled into the closing credit. Their love story proves that even epic heroes need a safe harbor. And sometimes the harbor is a single, determined publicist for life. Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, the strength and stay sovereigns. In the candlelit nave of Westminster Abbey, on November 20th, 1947, a 9-foot wedding cake stood guard while a war-weary Briton exhaled. 19-year-old Princess Elizabeth promised to obey her dashing naval lieutenant cousin. He promised unshakable service. Across 73 shared years, they unveiled cities, christened ships, and raised corgis and monarchs alike. Behind the balcony waves, Philip tuned the radios on their Land Rovers and grilled sausages for palace staff picnics. On their golden wedding lunch in 1997, the Queen declared, "He has, quite simply, been my strength and stay all these years." The normally stoic Duke blushed scarlet, then whispered, "And I'm still here, ma'am." When Philip died in 2021, pandemic rules forced Elizabeth to sit masked and alone in St. George's Chapel. Yet the image of her small black-clad figure beside an empty stall carried the weight of a kingdom's grief and gratitude. She followed him 16 months later, her final written note on his coffin reading, "In loving memory, Lilibet." Sovereign or not, love reduced even royalty to a handwritten nickname and a shared, unbreakable code for a timeless reign. Barbara and George H.W. Bush, the World War pen pals. She was 16, he 17, when they met at a Connecticut Christmas dance in 1941. Chandelier crystals rattling from the big band bass drum. Soon George shipped out as the Navy's youngest pilot. Barbara flooded the Pacific mailbags with blue ink letters doused in perfume. One envelope arrived singed at the edges after surviving a carrier fire. George tucked it in his flight jacket through 35 combat missions. On shore leave, January 6, 1945, they married before a borrowed altar spray of camellias. Political campaigns, a presidential term, and the loss of 3-year-old daughter Robin to leukemia tested but never broke them. George summarized the math. "I have climbed perhaps the highest mountain, but even that cannot hold a candle to being Barbara's husband." In retirement, they skydived on milestone birthdays and read each other's favorites from the Book of Psalms at breakfast. When Barbara died in 2018, George murmured, "Love you, Bar," then joined her 7 months later. Their 73-year duet ended on the same note it started, a dance. This time in whatever eternal ballroom awaits decorated pilots and first ladies. Jerry and Meara Stille, the vaudeville vow-keepers. Buzzing club smoke, 1953. A red-haired drama student named Meara stormed out after bombing her set. Jerry Stille, 5'5" of Brooklyn earnestness, chased her down Broadway and offered coffee plus free improv tips. She took the coffee, but gave the lessons. A year later, they married and debuted as Stille and Meara on The Ed Sullivan Show, riffing on ethnic misunderstandings and newlywed squabbles. Their timing was so tight that directors complained they ruined rehearsal because nobody can stop laughing. After television fame faded, they agreed to quit working together to save the marriage. Counterintuitive, yet it worked. Anne pursued stage drama. Jerry chased sitcom roles. At night, they still rehearsed one-liners across the dinner table, using salt shakers as microphones. Asked late in life how they lasted 61 years, Jerry answered, "There were no walls between us." When Anne passed in 2015, he slept beside a stack of her show scripts until his own curtain call 5 years later. Their comedy belonged to the world, but the punchline, to love and be loved, was strictly private and forever in their apartment. Camera flash, rum cake crumbs glistening on linoleum, stage lights catching Bonnie Bartlett's knowing smirk, jungle humidity beating on Janet Sheen's brow, newsroom teleprompter blinking beside Jean Rather's watercolor palette, a Bel Air living room shaking with Ginnie Newhart's famously explosive cackle. Over each scene, 2 clasped hands glow like polished brass, still warm after 6, 7, nearly 8 decades of friction, forgiveness, and fierce loyalty. You can almost smell the mixtures: airplane fuel in Kirk's jacket, magnolia and popcorn from planes, Phillips charcoaled sausages, White House rose garden dew, the tang of Manhattan sidewalks after summer rain. Listen for the recurring soundtrack: laughter, typewriter bells, rum cake frosting plopping, an off-key harmonica, a whispered strength and stay. So what threads bind these 10 love sagas? Shared purpose, daily curiosity, letters on real paper, and the stubborn belief that problems taste better after a kiss, or at least after one good joke. If their stories lit a spark, feed it. Ask someone you love a brand new question tonight. Write them a note and seal it with something sweeter than emoji. Thanks for traveling through 70+ years of heartbeats with me. Like what you heard? Hit subscribe right now. It's painless. And drop your own please favorite love story in the comments. Until next time, keep the reels and your promises rolling.